Welcome back to Syndology 101. The Viper is back, and that's about as dramatic of an entrance as we're going to get. I'm not going to edit out anything, but that's about as dramatic an entrance as we're going to get. Let's talk about the Viper. It's been a little bit. The Viper has changed some. So let's go over it. Let's start off with the wheels. These are CCW 3-piece forged aluminum wheels. I did not originally plan on changing from the factory wheels. I really liked the second gen wheels. They were very nice. They're still very nice. And most likely, when I get this car to the point that I can take a road trip, and I'm confident, relatively confident, in a second gen Viper going on a road trip, I will probably put the factory wheels back on instead of these all aluminum CCWs. They're very nice wheels. I was not too sure about the color when the opportunity came around for these wheels. So these wheels I picked up from one of my favorite places for Mopar accessories and upgrades and all that sort of thing. It's a place that I found when I was building and working on the Challenger, which is 797 Performance. 797performance.com. Take a look here. 797performance.com. Great group of guys. Very instrumental in making this happen. I say that because they had some weld wheels on clearance. They knew I had picked up a Viper recently, and Nick over there, he hit me up. He said, "Hey, they got some Viper wheels." I took a look. All they had on that list were the rear wheels, so I said, I like my wheels. All they have are rears, not the front. The rears obviously are a lot wider than the front. The rears are 13 inches wide. Fronts from the factory are 10 inches. These are 11. So there's a difference. You don't want to run the rears up front. So about an hour or so passed, and he told me about these CCWs, which had been around for a little while and needed to be sold. He found out about them. They're for a Viper, and well, we worked out a deal. And next thing I knew, I had CCW wheels. And it was very funny because after kind of browsing Facebook for the different Viper groups and stuff, I saw CCW wheels. I looked at their website. They're extremely nice, very light 3-piece forged wheels. And I had looked at their website and was interested in their wheels. I thought, you know what? If I'm going to do some wheels, it would probably be CCW. Next thing I know, I came across an amazing deal on a set of CCWs. CCWs are, it's one of those wheels, you buy it, it takes a little while for them to build them to your specifications. You literally go through check boxes, and you got to know your wheel specs and what you're getting to order a CCW wheel. So I lucked out on these. Huge shout out to 797 Performance for making this happen. I wasn't too sure about gold on the green Viper, and initially I really wasn't too sure about it. The price was amazing for these wheels. And I said, you know what? Worst case scenario, it's the design I want. I can have them powder coated. It works with the green. It's out there. It's crazy. It fits. So I went with it. I'm glad I did. I wrapped it all the way around in Kenda KA20As, or it's KR20As. KR20As. Which is kind of a budget tire. They're a drift tire. We had really good luck with these and my brother's still running them on his big turbo Focus ST. So I was confident for grip and for, this car doesn't go out in weather. It just goes out. So it's a sport tire. They have grip. Out back we have 335s. Let's get a little look see back here. Actually, on the camera they look not as wide as they are, but 335. You got to think the Challenger. I'm running currently a 305 compared to the 335 on the Viper. So pretty wide. I have the 200 tread wears on the back for the most grip. Obviously, they're not going to last very long, but it's a Dodge Viper. It's not going to get driven a ton. Then up front, I have the KR20As that have a 300 tread wear. So, and that's what my brother runs on his big turbo Focus ST. They're going to grip. They're obviously not something you're going to be driving in bad weather. They'll work. I do maybe eventually, as time goes on, maybe we'll do like some Michelins or something like the factory has. But again, I do like a good budget tire that gets the job done. I will admit that. So, anyways, obviously we've seen these CCWs. Now in the video. The initial video on the Viper, it did not have stripes. It now has the white stripes. And if you know anything about the Viper GTS, white stripes, the twin white stripes are just pretty much part of the package. And I had fooled myself originally in thinking that I did not need the white stripes. The white stripes make it. After I did the wheels, I said, I have the stripe kit. It came with the car. Let's do it. Let's go for it. I saw a picture came up on online, probably in Google image search, that had a green Viper that had the white stripes and it had some aftermarket wheels. It just looked right. I said, you know what? I've already started the process with the wheels. Let's see about the stripes. I have a stripe kit. Let's go for it. Now, granted, I was not going to do the vinyl. I know well enough from the Challenger that vinyl is not my thing. So I contacted, there's a local wrap shop here in my area, and I called him on the phone and I told him that I had some white stripes that I needed installed. We talked about it. He wasn't exactly excited about the prospect, and I can't blame him, especially when I told him I had a kit already. And then I told him what car it was. He was a little bit more excited at that point. We had a meetup. I talked to him. I brought the kit that I got that came with the car from Viper store. And I also figured out with this camera, the screen locks at 5 to 10 minutes. You can't change it. It's just part of it. Figured it out. So he took a look at the kit that I had. He, like I said, he's more into doing full body wraps. This vinyl is a little bit different. We talked about it. We agreed to I dropped the kit off with him so he could really take a look at it. He said he would mess with it. He would look at doing it. Very professional. I know enough about vinyl that I knew he knew what he was talking about, and I was very confident in his skills and his ability after talking to him. So I left the kit with him. He took a look, it had been in a tube for who knows how long, and he let it sit, and he looked it over. And last weekend, I dropped it off with him so he could work on it in his shop. 179 Garage. You can find him on Instagram. You can find him on Facebook. He's got his wrapping and sign business, and then he does some work on. He does parts for first generation Dodge pickup trucks, which there's not a lot of parts out there for them. He has, if you've got a tailgate, the older vehicles, they had an aluminum panel on the tailgate. Those always, and especially older Dodges, they get beat up. They were farm trucks, they were work trucks. And he does a custom reproduction. So if you want something on your show truck that is custom lettering or whatever it is, check him out. 179 Garage. He took this job on, and he did an amazing job. I cannot thank him enough for the work that he did making this car look like it should. What is wrong with my camera? Look like I'm way off. Must be something in the settings. That's a Syndology video. No production value whatsoever. He did an amazing job with the vinyl. He used the kit, which those kits use a different type of vinyl than vinyl wrap, which is one of the things we talked about. There was, with all of the curves and the crazy double contours that go on the back here, this is a different vinyl. You wouldn't know it because it matches really well. This is wrap vinyl. The stripes on the very base of the ducktail, the hood, or the roof and the hood are the kit. He finished it off with his own vinyl, did an amazing job. It looks like a Viper should. Now, granted, I have been told by multiple people it sits a little high. These are factory conies. Maybe we'll look at some BC coilovers or silver coilovers and drop it down an inch or two, but not too low to get that finished look. But my goodness, the wheels, the stripes, I love them both, but my goodness, the stripes make it. I added a little tribute on the back, laid some vinyl down, a Ken Block 43 signature, and I'm gonna brag on myself a little bit. That is two different two vinyl decals that I laid side by side to get that popping look, that 3D look. So 179 Garage, you're still way better than me, but I can lay a little bit of vinyl. Speaking of laying a little bit of vinyl, because we're talking about the Viper, I'm bragging on all the stuff that's gone on. This car did not come with any emblems. This car has been through some stuff in its life. It is a driver. It's not perfect. I did order the emblems for the side I read the manual, I measured it out, and I put the Viper GTS factory style emblems on the side, and they came out good. They're good. I'm gonna toot my own horn. So now it's got Viper GTS on the side. My good friend, Miss Mopartina, cut a vinyl for the badge, for the front badge. Those badges are not cheap. I don't feel like this car is I mean, it's a driver. I don't want to destroy a $300 badge up front. And then she did one on the third brake light to finish it up. Maybe I'll have her do something for the bumper. There should be a Viper over here and a Dodge on this side. Most likely, we'll do that in the future. So, that's the upgrade. That's where the Viper was and where it is sitting now. So, gonna sit here for a moment. Got the neon in the background. Little short interruption. I thought I could finish the video, but I just drank a bunch of water. Had to use the bathroom. Anyways, so aside from the upgrades that I didn't plan on doing, there was some maintenance that this Viper needed. Because, again, this Viper is not a pristine vehicle. I knew that going into it. I knew that from the price. But this was something that I felt like I could take on. So, I don't know how far I got into it in the original video on the Viper, but this is a car that is not perfect. And I'm okay with that because I wanted something that I could drive. This allowed me to pick up this Viper, a car that I have truly always wanted, and spend some time getting to know the ins and outs of it by fixing things. So, since picking this car up, I have done a few things. The oil cooler lines were old. They were leaking. I replaced those. As I was replacing them, the oil cooler itself, which is a very large oil cooler, we'll get some pictures of it eventually, one of the end fittings actually started to twist off. It's just a cheap, not cheap, it's just a very thin aluminum oil cooler with AN fittings. One of them decided to twist off, which getting another oil cooler, a factory style oil cooler, was pretty much they're non-existent parts for these cars, these Generation 1 and 2 Vipers. There's not a lot of parts out there for them. They're very, very expensive. There was an aftermarket one that was very close. It cost about $800. But it's an oil cooler. So I did some looking. I was able to find Mishimoto had a very similar style, about the same size, just a hair smaller. And I almost picked that up. I found another one that basically was the Mishimoto. And let's be honest, Mishimoto is not exactly super high quality. They charge high quality prices. So I found one very similar. I picked it up for $100 and I installed that on the Viper. We're good there. While I was at it, I noticed that there was a coolant leak in or was about to be a coolant leak in a coolant bypass hose, heater core hose, if you will. Thing about these hoses for the Viper, they're not out there. They're just not out there. You can get silicone radiator hoses, which I got new upper and lower silicone radiator hoses. I did go with Mishimoto. I did go with them. So while I'm not against them, I got a kit. They're very nice hoses. I put the upper and lower radiator hoses on. I built a coolant bypass hose for this car. I also replaced one of the other hoses while I was in there. Also built it from, generic pieces, elbows, and that sort of thing. The clamps for those heater hoses on the water pump are very hard to get to. They're very hard to get to. Even if they were squeeze clamps, not fun. So I replaced those. This car, one of the things, especially driving it home initially, was the temperature. In the middle of the gauge, there's a little range that's 190 degrees. This would always run up at the very top to, right in between, especially if you were in traffic, right in between 190 at the top of the range and the overheating. That's where it was at. If you idled at all, if you stopped, you slowed down, it would run hot. Which, from what I read, is fairly common with these second generation, first generation Vipers. This car has an aluminum radiator already. Normally that would be something I would throw in, but it already has one, which is good, but it was still running hot. It has a factory heat range thermostat, factory fan. It is missing one shroud for the radiator, and the intake for the Viper is not very big for the size of the engine. So it is missing one of those shrouds. I am looking for it on eBay. I would like to have the original or I will build one eventually. But I went in with HP tuners, which was very funny because this is actually one of the cheapest cars that I've ever unlocked, is this Viper. And I went in, changed the fan settings. I dropped them each one 20 degrees. There's only one fan. There's only one. It's a very large fan. It's really not large, but it's one large fan that runs this. It's very noticeable. It runs a lot. It always is on when you're running this car. Because it does run warm. So what I was able to do was, with replacing those coolant hoses, getting rid of the place that was about to rupture, new hoses, and obviously new coolant all the way through, and then changing the fan settings, I went from running at, say, 220, 215 sitting to in traffic and stop and go. It's actually staying it stays right at that 190, at the top of the 190 range. So it's good. I'm still always watching that temp. I'm sure there's more I can do. And I've actually thought about putting a pusher fan on the front of the radiator just to give it a little help at with stop and go. I'd really just like to see that temperature down just a little bit more. There is more oil leaks. I noticed there is a chip in the oil pan at the mounting surface. I found on eBay an oil pan for the right price, another oil pan. This, I do believe, it does have the larger 10-quart oil pan instead of the standard 8.5-quart oil pan, which the 10-quart is not super easy to find. I did order an 8.5-quart that I found on eBay for a good price. Unfortunately, it showed up with an ear broke off during shipping. I got a return on it. It was wrapped okay. It wasn't wrapped great. Cast aluminum thick oil pans are not, they're not great. I would love to find a steel oil pan for this thing. They don't exist. I looked. Nobody makes anything like that. It's a Dodge Viper. They don't make a lot of things, unfortunately. However, one of the things that maybe I didn't mention in the original video is I also had a bit of a hesitation during application of throttle. This is going to be a long video. I do apologize for that. But I don't apologize, really. I'm just going to go through, talk about things. There was a hesitation. I wasn't too sure, but it did feel like something that was probably throttle position sensor related, or possibly fuel. I didn't want to get to the fuel pump. I would like to do that eventually so that I can fix the gas gauge, the fuel gauge level. The gas gauge does not work. And I haven't plugged HP tuners back in to verify that maybe the sender is fine and it's just the gauge in the dash. Either way, kind of sucks, but I was hoping that it wasn't fuel pump related. We'll get to that eventually. So I threw a throttle position sensor on there, and a throttle position sensor is something that's relatively cheap on these, as in the fact that it is the same throttle position sensor for all Dodge vehicles of about that year. Same one on my Durango. So $20 throttle position sensor, boom, changed it night and day. And I kind of figured that the throttle position sensor was the issue because when it was cold, the throttle response was pretty good. Once it warmed up, it would backfire, or not backfire, but it would hesitate really bad, and then it would kick on once you got in the throttle a little bit more. So what that told me was, while it's cold and it has cold start enrichment going on, the throttle response would be fine because it was getting extra fuel because of cold start. So threw the throttle position sensor on there, night and day difference, ran great. And it does. It runs very good, very strong. I haven't beat on it per se. I have broke the rear wheels loose a little bit around a corner, and it's a beautiful experience in this car. Haven't really done it since the new wheels are on. Hopefully these tires help rein it in a little bit. Other things that were wrong with this car that I have fixed since is out back, and when I first got it, if you got onto the throttle and off the throttle, there was a wiggle in the car. It would want to track different. What I trace that back to is on the setup of the Viper, in the independent rear suspension, there's a knuckle, and there's actually a hard-mounted tie rod, inner and outer tie rod, that go to that knuckle on the rear. One of those tie rods was actually wore out on this car, and it allowed play, which would allow that rear tire to move about half an inch to an inch of play when you got on and off the throttle, which would then make you track different when you got on and off the throttle. I replaced that. After doing a little bit of research, I found that is actually the same tie rod as what fits in the front, is the same as the rear, which is also the same as my Durango. So I initially ordered one specifically for that. It was not inexpensive as a full one-piece deal. It was like $500. However, I have found since then that there are separate pieces that you can buy that's just the tie rod that will fit back there, which is what I'm going to do on the other side. So I replaced that. It tracks really nice and true. I will eventually get a full alignment when I find a place that I can trust with this car, or I'll do it myself, which might be an option so that I fully know it. That is one thing I replaced. The brakes all the way around were getting a bit thin, the brake pads. So went ahead and replaced all of the rotors and all of the brake pads. The braking feels a lot better. And I haven't drove it a lot since then, but I can tell you the brakes do feel better. The old brakes, we literally had smoking after just a small, acceleration and quick stop. These feel better. We will see. I still have to drive this. I have not driven it much overall. After doing some maintenance, I still have some oil leaks underneath. Aside from the oil cooler hoses that I did change, I have not fully figured out what is leaking. It could be the oil filter adapter. The oil pan might be leaking a little bit. It's not from where it's broken. That's just a mounting place. I don't see a lot of oil coming from that area, but I will eventually replace the oil pan gasket. It's very easy. It's right in the middle. It's out in the open. Very easy to change. And it could also be one of the rear main. It could be a rear main. Could be a front timing cover seal. If it is that, I kind of have a partial plan of pulling the engine and doing a refresh of sorts. Parts for this engine are not exactly readily available, but we'll see what we can do. Even gaskets are just not something you're going to go down to AutoZone or O'Reilly's and get replacement gaskets for. It's just not in the cards. So we will see. A little bit of a little oil leak here or there is not a game changer. Oil pressure is good. It doesn't leak enough oil that I'm worried about it. I'll just add oil, and if it's something that I need to pull the engine for, or that it'll get pulled. So what else have I added and what else have I done? I replaced all 10 spark plugs. Really not that hard. They're at an angle. They're not the easiest to get to, but you don't need... I didn't find one that I really needed any sort of U-joint on or anything. I could pretty much get to each one of them if I did some removal of the cowl and the air conditioning box. Wasn't too bad. Replaced all 10 spark plugs. Replaced all of the wires. The spark plugs were in pretty decent shape. Really, they didn't look bad. The spark plug wires, I had one that came apart as I took it out. So overall, those weren't bad. Went ahead, obviously, and did the, a tune-up per se. New oil, obviously, with the oil lines while it was out. The other thing that I did was I replaced the factory accordion-style air intakes through the throttle bodies with silicone hoses that are straight through. That's the 10 horsepower bump that the ACR's got in this year. Did it make a difference? I don't know. Because again, I'm not running it very hard at this point in time. And the other odd thing, was in the airbox, in the factory plastic airbox, I found 2 sets of air filters. There was newer air filters, and then stuffed into the airbox was an old air filter in front of it. Cotton air filters, K&N, probably K&N, stuffed in front of it. And this airbox is missing the clips. It had two drywall screws holding it together with a total of 4 air filters. So I'm thinking I'm getting a little bit better airflow now that I have just one set of air filters in it. I have found in the middle of the V of the engine, between the intake manifold, I actually found not a 10 millimeter, but I did find 2 11 millimeter sockets and an extension in the V of the engine just sitting. That was fun. Obviously, a magnet got them out. It would have been funnier if it was 10 millimeter, but they were 11 millimeters. So the joke wasn't quite as funny as it could have been. I really wish it had been 10 millimeters. I have hooked the seatbelts back up. Those were disconnected. And slowly but surely, I'm just working on getting this thing up to shape. Again, it's kind of like that meme of the dirty-faced guy looking up at you as you put wheels and stripes on the car. There's stuff that needs to be done. I'm getting to it, but it does look good. And let's be honest, a Viper is supposed to look good, and it does. Because I have cars to beat on. Okay? This is about driving, cruising, and enjoying, and that's what I plan on doing with this car. It looks good. It still needs some work. I have some interior stuff to do. Have to fix the exterior door handles. My friend Scott, my good friend Scott, I hope you're listening this far along, helped me with this rear liftgate glass. It was starting to separate from the brackets that it attaches to. We epoxied it back together so that we can open this rear lift glass and get inside to the trunk. But I've rambled on enough. We're looking at already a 30 plus minute video. Maybe I'll break it up into two, or I'll make you watch all of it. But that's the update on the Viper. Again, huge thanks to 797 Performance for the wheels. And of course, 179 Garage. Check them out, both of them on Instagram or Facebook. 179 Garage for the amazing vinyl work on these stripes. That is where I'm going to leave it for this episode and update from Sendology 101. I will catch you guys on the next one. If you have any questions or things you'd like to ask about the Viper, leave them down below. And I'm sure there will be an update very soon on the car. Catch you later.